Is Joe Burrow the best quarterback in the NFL? Is the Bengals offensive line arguably the worst in the NFL? Time to answer both of those questions and much, much more right now on Enter the Jungle. Hi again, everyone, and welcome into Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He's Andrew Fox Miller. Make sure you catch us every single Tuesday on the YouTube channel Cincinnati Bengals Talk, where there's almost 56,000 Bengals fans that have hit that subscribe button. Make sure you check us out there or wherever you get your podcast. That's Apple, that's Spotify, and Amazon, plus weekly on FanDuel Sports Network as well. Andrew, let's dive into a bunch of different things. We're going to get into wrestling in this show. We're going to talk trenches in this show. We're even going to talk trades in this show, which is right up my alley. But we got to start with Joe Burrow because it's officially list season. The NFL Top 100 is coming out this week. We've seen Pro Football Focus and other outlets do lists and rankings. And I figured, no, we don't need to do the official Cincinnati Bengals Talk ranking of top 10 Bengals or anything like that. But what we could do is just look at Joe Burrow and answer a simple question. And I'm going to pose it to you. And I want you to take your orange and black glasses off and look at it as objectively as you can. Is Joe Burrow the number one quarterback in the NFL? And if not, where would you rank him going into this season?
Okay. If someone ranked Joe Burrow number one, it's at the point now where I don't know that I'm going to argue it. You know what I mean? Part of me thinks by default, fair or not, Patrick Mahomes is still reigning supreme on that list. He's going to remain at number one. I know some outlets out there have started to bump him down over the last performance in the last year or two. Okay. It depends how much weight you put on winning championships, how much weight you put on, physical traits and accuracy, so on and so forth. For me, I think by default, Patrick Mahomes is going to be there until he's dethroned. And I don't know that Joe Burrow's quite done it yet. Again, someone could make the argument for different reasons. I think if we were to put him in a tier, Joe Burrow's in that tier. Patrick Mahomes is there. Joe Burrow maybe being second, possibly third. Lamar Jackson's up there, of course. Josh Allen, there's your tier one. Joe Burrow's certainly in that tier. Are you telling me right now, James, are you saying definitively he is number one? Objectively, number one?
I don't see how you could have watched the Super Bowl where Patrick Mahomes looked lost and said, oh, Joe Burrow wouldn't look as lost. So it's like, oh, well, yeah, Josh Allen's awesome. And the reigning MVP and Lamar Jackson. And you know what you don't say about those guys? Both guys with MVPs. You don't say, man, their defense stinks. Offensive line is questionable. Coaching at times is questionable. But if they get into the playoffs, good luck. You don't want to see them. No one says that. And yet everybody was saying that about Joe Burrow last year. Everyone. And so when I put that together and I think about it, and I think about who Joe is as a quarterback and what I think Joe is, he's the closest thing that we have in today's game to Tom Brady. The closest thing that we have in today's game to Peyton Manning. But he can move a little bit more. He's got some modern elements to his game. I think there are plenty of people that would take Joe Burrow number one. That doesn't mean that he's the most physically gifted. That doesn't mean that he's the best athlete. I think Lamar's the best athlete. I think Josh Allen is the biggest freak. I think Patrick Mahomes is obviously the most accomplished. You could say all of those things, and all of them are true. And if you have one of those quarterbacks, you're going to feel really, really darn good about what you have. But you're rolling into a game with Joe Burrow, and I think you have the edge. Always have the edge there. And I know that seems weird for some. And there are going to be so many fans of other teams that come on the video and say, oh my goodness, you're fine. Take your guy. But seeing Joe Burrow, knowing how he operates day to day, week to week, I've seen really good quarterbacks before. I covered Baker Mayfield. I covered Andy Dalton. I've seen it up close. It's different. And everyone's going to say, oh, well, so is Lamar and so is Josh and so is Patrick. No doubt about it. But it would be really, really hard for me if I had the first pick in a quarterback draft to say, no, I'm going to take this guy over Joe Burrow. It's a really, really tough thing. And so that's what I would do. Anyways, your reaction to that, I could go on and on and on. But yes, I think if I was drafting number 1 overall and I had to take a quarterback, I would take Joe.
Yeah, I think we talk about Josh Allen, Lamar.
Mm-hmm.
What's the biggest knock on them right now? Especially Lamar. Are you going to put a dent into the postseason? Are you going to actually cover some ground in there? Are you going to at least get to the Super Bowl? Regardless of any ranking out there, you could sit there and say, at the end of the day, Joe Burrow took his team to the Super Bowl, and it wasn't a scenario where he was lucky to be along for the ride. Like, he was instrumental in leading the team, and that continues to be the case. He's one of the best in the league. That is a fact. The numbers will tell you that. I think it's fair if someone wants to say the general consensus is Patrick Mahomes for the very reasons I just listed for Joe Burrow. But if we're going to go off of postseason success, out of that tier 1, Burrow's right up there, if not slightly behind Mahomes, depending on how you want to look at it.
It's interesting because it is a pick your flavor to a degree. But Joe's brains and mindset and IQ, that's going to age very, very well. Like he's just about to enter his prime. I don't think Joe Burrow was in his prime last year. He's coming off of the wrist. He was dealing with all these things around him. And I get it. Yeah, he's been hurt a little bit more than Josh Allen or Mahomes. Fine. But when I look at what he's asked to do down in and down out, part of it is by his own doing. I'm not sure that there's anyone that I would rather have. And I think that's it's really, really tough. But if you're going to go with brains, brawn, IQ, like all of those things, I think a lot of people would say, oh, well, Mahomes does it all. He can do all of those things. He's a really good athlete. He's got the arm. He's got the IQ. And I do think he has the IQ, but not at Joe's level. Joe is Brady. You could take Brady and Manning, and he is the closest thing to them. I don't think he's as elite as Brady was. Maybe he gets there. Brady is like a freaking supercomputer that had evolved into another supercomputer, and that was it. Because he couldn't move. He couldn't do the fun stuff that Joe does. And so he runs like you. And so for him to be able to maneuver enough and slide just a half step. And so Joe is, it's so interesting to me because I think even with all the questions, and we're about to get to the offensive line, even with the questions on the coaching staff, there are people that still don't think Zach Taylor's a good coach. Just to give you an idea, there are a lot of people that think the Bengals are such a bad organization when compared to the Bills, Ravens, and Chiefs. Fine. Well, if you feel that way, then just ask yourself, if Mahomes and Burrow switch places, would the Chiefs still be winning?
But his weapons, James, Joe Burrow, he's got his weapons. He's got Jamar. He's got T. You're going to hear that time and time again. Josh Allen doesn't have that. Lamar Jackson doesn't have that. Patrick Mahomes doesn't have that right now.
Mm-hmm.
That's the one thing I think that continues to work against Joe when you start talking about.
Sure. Okay. So give him a Chris Jones. Swap out T. Higgins and Chris Jones right now. You telling me the Bengals aren't winning a game? Like, swap out Zach Taylor and Andy Reid. Swap out, and maybe Al Golden is Steve Spagnuolo, but Steve Spagnuolo and Al Golden. Like, it's kind of, you look at it, it's like, oh, well. And so that's it. Like, I this is going to be very Cincinnati, but like people are going to be like, you're such a biased homer. But I promise you, like if I sat down and Roger Goodell called me and said, all right, James, you get to pick any quarterback to start your franchise with. It's going to be really, really hard for me to say I don't want Joe Burrow because I've seen it. I know how he is as a leader. I think he's the best leader out of these guys, out of all of them. I think that he's so obsessive about it. And I also think he's the only one that has the IQ. Like there's no, like maybe Arch Manning is the next one. Like I don't even know who it would be. Like there's no next supercomputer brain in the league. Like I think it is him. And then that's it. And Mahomes is probably second, but there's a gap there when it comes to IQ and reading and diagnosing and all of those things. So call me a homer, call me whatever you want. I would take Joe Burrow as the number one quarterback in the league. But what about the offensive line? There was a really interesting piece done recently when it comes to Bengals and where they rank among all 32 NFL teams in the offensive line rankings. Do you agree with their low ranking? We'll tell you what that ranking is and react to it coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox-Miller. I'm James Rapien, and it's time to react to some interesting rankings from Warren Sharp at sharpfootballanalysis.com. Him and his staff voted on all 32 offensive line units in the league. And the Bengals, well, I got some good news, Andrew. They weren't last. They were second last. The Bengals were 31st out of 32 teams. Only the Houston Texans were worse. And it's because they got rid of Laramie Tunsil, and they've done a lot of questionable things for my money this offseason. And yes, the Bengals, they got rid of Alex Kappa, and Cordell Volson is probably going to be a backup, but Lucas Patrick and Dylan Fairchild and Cody Ford aren't giving Sharp in the team at Sharp Football Analysis a lot of confidence. Your reaction to the Bengals being ranked 31st out of 32 offensive lines, given that they do have Amarius Mims and Orlando Brown Jr. and Ted Karras, three pieces that I think you like a lot.
I mean, look, we'll start with, it's not ridiculous. I mean, if we're going to base it off of past performance this past season, okay. If we're going to go off a projection, then that shows me their level of faith or their level of how encouraged they are by some of the changes that took place from a staff standpoint. Like, first, it comes down to Frank Pollock being the constant that has been removed. If Pollock proves to even be like a sizable fraction of the problem over the past several years, and especially if Scott Peters provides any sort of spark for this O-line, I think they have just as good a chance as any offensive line to be middle of the pack by the end of the season, for sure. But we're just dealing with a lot of unknowns. So it depends on which side of this you're really buying into. Do you buy into Scott Peters? Do you buy into the removal of Frank Pollock? And of course, do you buy into assuming Dylan Fairchild is going to be playing starting guard? And then whatever happens with the battle at right guard, who knows? But yeah, it's your level of confidence in what you know about this team. Is Scott Peters the answer?
Cordell Volson and Alex Kappa ranked 97th and 98th out of 103 interior linemen in pressure rate allowed last year. That's pretty darn bad. That's the wrong side of it. So I think that it's realistic that they're better. The question is how much better? How much better? We're going to talk about Dylan Fairchild in a second, but like, how much better is he really going to be than Cordell? How much better is a Cody Ford / Lucas Patrick combo going to be over Alex Kappa? Maybe a little better. And you could argue, a little better is going to go a long way. And maybe it does. But they haven't done enough here. That's the bottom line. They haven't done enough to address their offensive line. And I don't think they're signing a guard. They should sign a guard. They haven't signed a guard. And I mentioned the Houston Texans. Shaq Mason can play right guard. Have Shaq Mason come in as well and have him compete. Doesn't seem like they're going to do that. Fine. Don't do that. I think it's a mistake, and time will tell. But the one thing that got in the way of Joe Burrow from going to back-to-back Super Bowls was having three backup linemen starting in the AFC Championship game against the Chiefs. That mattered a ton. When you know that's what cost you in Super Bowl 56, you would think that you would be so like, I got to fix this, that you'd be going to the extreme to fix it. The Bengals aren't doing that. And that it doesn't mean Dylan Fairchild isn't going to be good. It doesn't mean that Lucas Patrick isn't a solid vet, but they've done the bare minimum to address the guard position this offseason.
Of course, I agree with what you're saying. You're thinking personnel. What about coaching staff? Is that a factor? Like, is that sort of the X factor in all this? It seems like the Bengals are banking on this being the big difference maker, right? Across the board, not just on the offensive line.
And how fair
with all the changes they made in coaching, but specific to the offensive line, of course.
No doubt. How fair is that to do that? Say, hey, Scott, look, we hired you for a reason. You teach that hand-to-hand combat. It better work. Like, okay, well, it might work. Dylan Fairchild may be a future Pro Bowler. Does he need to be thrown to the wolves right away? Or do you feel better if you had a really solid left guard, solid right guard, and you have a rookie like that can be your your seventh line. I think it's interesting. Now, by week 8, I may feel different, but it feels like a huge gamble for what has been a thorn in your side and has cost you really every year of the Joe Burrow era that he's ended, healthy or not. Guard has cost you with the injuries, with the playoffs, and then last year, if they were getting better guard play, even with the defense, they probably win at least one Baltimore game. They win plenty of more games. They're definitely in the playoffs. They might be AFC North champs, and that's what's wild about it. But I mentioned Dylan Fairchild. Let's get to Dylan Fairchild. He did something really, really cool. We're going to break it down coming up next. Would Andrew Fox Miller win a wrestling match with Dylan Fairchild? The answer is no. Welcome back in to Enter the Jungle. I'm James Rapien. He is Andrew. Of course, I wouldn't win a wrestling match against Dylan Fairchild. There aren't many people on the planet that are winning a wrestling match against the two-time state champ, including former UFC middleweight champion Sean Strickland, who went up against Fairchild over the weekend. And he said, the man can wrestle. He wrote on Instagram and said it after going up against Fairchild, who was not only a two-time undefeated high school state champion, finished 67-0, 2 heavyweight state titles, 22-0 as a senior, and the state title match lasted like 30 seconds. Dylan Fairchild is a beast. What did you think when you saw this, Andrew?
Well, I did remember, of course, that Fairchild had a background in wrestling. He talked about it in the locker room interview after he was drafted that we had on Cincinnati Bengals Talk on YouTube. So go check that out if you haven't. He talks a little bit about that, wrestling in high school. He's clearly, in this clip, by the way, bigger than Strickland. I haven't looked up the weight, but just looking, it's very, very obvious. And it's a lot of wrestling and grappling here. And you could sit there and say, okay, well, Strickland's more, specialty in boxing and striking. But still, by the way, can we agree that Dylan Fairchild may be the winner of viral offseason coverage for the Bengals at this point? Because we had Joe Burrow throwing a baseball like a person who throws a football for a living. And we also had the whole better make the playoffs quip from a kid at the Fanatics Fest. And then we have Jamar just trying to catch a commercial flight and not get called out by a grown adult who feels like he's owed an autograph. And then even the Bengals locker room lost the offseason with the FAT acronym. So Dylan Fairchild has to be the winner here, right?
As of now, yeah. We'll see what else. What else?
Time of this recording,
he's a winner. He's a winner, no doubt. And I like it. I'm still going to temper my expectations for him as a rookie. I think he's going to start. I think he'll be okay. It's really hard to start. Amarius Mims was just okay when you compare him to the rest of the league last year, but I thought he was a really good rookie year for him. That makes sense. And so this could happen again, but I love seeing this stuff. This hand-to-hand combat stuff, super athletic. I think that's the thing, is how well he was moving. And so if Scott Peters, the new Bengals offensive line coach, is who the Bengals think he is, I think he's going to get a lot out of Dylan Fairchild with the hand-to-hand technique stuff. And it was really cool seeing this. And who knows, maybe he has a future in MMA after, his 15-year Hall of Fame Bengals career in Cincinnati.
Yeah, and I just want to remind you, James, Dylan Fairchild was he was the rookie that I picked as making the immediate impact, the biggest impact in year one. And Demetrius Knight was up there, and I feel like he's getting a lot of chatter right now, and that's well-deserved because I was torn between the two. But I picked Fairchild, and things are working. They're looking good. It seemed to be working in my favor right now on that projection.
Working in your favor right now. Interesting.
That's right.
So a little wrestling clip, and now you're buying more Fairchild stock. We'll see if that investment pays off. Up next, well, the Bengals, they have a rival that made a bold move. We'll react to that coming up next. Welcome back to Enter the Jungle. He's Andrew Fox Miller. I'm James Rapien. And the Bengals, well, 2 upcoming opponents in 2025, made a huge trade this week. The Steelers agreed to a blockbuster deal that sent all-pro safety Minkah Fitzpatrick to the Dolphins in exchange for star cornerback Jalen Ramsey and veteran tight end Jonnu Smith. The Steelers also receive a 2027 7th-round pick. The Dolphins get a 2027 5th-round pick. Wild times in the North. I think the Dolphins got better. I think that the Steelers are going all in, and I don't know how much better this makes them. What do you think about this deal?
I think it's interesting. Compared to the Bengals, the Steelers, they seem to be taking the opposite approach to their offseason. We talked about it a bit earlier, right? Pittsburgh, they didn't make many coaching changes, despite many people thinking maybe they would do so after failing to win a playoff game in 8 years. They have been more about personnel changes, which I find interesting. Let me ask you this. Who would you rather have on your offense, by the way? Like Russell Wilson, I'm thinking about last season, right? Russell Wilson throwing the ball to George Pickens, Pat Freiermuth, Darnell Washington, Najee Harris in your backfield, or Aaron Rodgers, DK Metcalf, and then you've got Jonnu Smith, and then you basically a 3 tight end set, right? Along with Freiermuth and Washington, then Jalen Warren, and I guess Caleb Johnson in your backfield. Keeping in mind, Smith and Freiermuth would probably be the de facto wide receiver 2 on that team until we see otherwise, right? What would you rather have? Have they changed? Have they upgraded on offense?
Yeah, they've upgraded because Aaron Rodgers is slightly better than Russell Wilson and probably just as annoying, which is hard to do. George Pickens is a head case and DK Metcalf is the better version. So, yeah, I mean, I think they've upgraded, but Minkah Fitzpatrick is the best player in this deal. And I would not be a fan of giving up the best player in this deal. I think he's still better than Jalen Ramsey. I think he offers more. Of that Ramsey contract's weird. So the Dolphins, they get out of a bad contract. They get off of a Jonnu Smith player that's, he put up some numbers and fantasy-wise, it'll be interesting, I think. But overall is a big receiver that can't block. And so it's like, all right, well, you can find another one of those. Like, I don't think they invested a ton. And they get off of that Ramsey contract and they get Minkah. Like I like it for the Dolphins. The Bengals are going to have to deal with the Dolphins on December 21st. They play the Steelers twice on October 16th and November 16th. We're obviously going to have you covered on all 3 of those matchups. So please, please, please hit that subscribe button on YouTube. And until next time, for Andrew Fox Miller, I'm James Rapien. Thank you so much for watching.